Society is like a balloon. It's constantly building up this pressure, and then it eventually collapses. So this presentation is how to prepare for the impending apocalypse. All right, so there's three major ways that an apocalypse can happen. You have an economic catastrophe. We've seen that in Germany after World War I. They had hyperinflation. We see that in Venezuela today. We saw in 2008 with the subprime crisis. We saw it in 1929 and the United States with the Great Depression. Looming economic catastrophe could happen at any given moment, just given the right circumstances. Next, you have an epidemic, measles, AIDS, some sort of breakout, Ebola. This is something that certainly could happen. Environmental. You have things like an EMP, earthquake, hurricane. These are things that we often don't ever predict, but they just kind of happen out of nowhere. All right, so this is the bug out bag. This is the only way that you're going to prepare for the apocalypse. So when I say bug out, I want you guys to say bag, all right? Bug out.
Bag.
Bug out.
Bag.
Julie, I want you to do it too.
Okay.
Bug out.
Bag.
Bug out.
Bag.
All right, hell yeah. Okay, so now I've got shelter, food, medical, communication, navigation, and miscellaneous. So shelter, this is how you're going to protect yourself in the apocalypse. You're going to have a one-person tent. You'll be able to sleep at night in this tent with your sleeping bag. You'll have extra clothes. I don't want to be wearing this for probably a month. You want a fire starter kit so you can cook your food. Next, you're going to have food. You're going to have MREs, meals ready to eat, water purification tablets, and seeds. The seeds, I think they're kind of symbolic in a way because it's going to show that society is rebuilding itself from the ground up. So you can harvest your food, eat your potatoes, carrots, whatever you fancy, I guess. Medical, first aid kit, hygiene kit, hand sanitizer. All these in case something you get hurt, you scratch your elbow, you cut your shoulder or something, I don't know. You can use this medical kit to help you out. Next, you have communication navigation. So you're going to have a map, a compass, solar power charger, and cable, survival whistle, bright colored bandana, flare, and glow sticks. All of these are going to help you get out of a bad situation. So if you don't really know where you're going, your compass will help direct you in the right way. A map can help you figure out where you need to be, perhaps. Flare, just in case you get lost or you need someone to come rescue you, can shoot that up in the air. And finally, we have miscellaneous. You have a multi-tool, knife, gun, flashlight, headlamp, hatchet, trench shovel, pocket survival guide, duct tape, batteries, goggles, paracord, and gold. So all of these, I mean, some of them are self-explanatory. A knife that'll help you in a lot of ways. You can eat meat that way. There's a lot of utilities for a knife. A gun, obviously protect yourself, hunt maybe. Flashlight, hatchet, that's going to help you chop wood for your fire. And one of the most important items on here is gold because it has a stored value over time. So this will help in the event of an economic recession.
Okay, so what's going to happen is in an economic recession, the currency is going to be basically worthless or pretty near it. The IMF, the International Monetary Fund, defines a recession a little differently, where the per capita per person GDP, gross domestic product, lowers at a rate for about the duration of 2 quarters. Okay, so there's three significant recessions that's happened so far. I mean, there's others, but these are the most noticeable or important. The first one is the Great Recession. The editors at history.com, they said it started at December of 2007, where the subprime mortgages were being lended out to lenders that had little to no credit. They're buying too many houses that they couldn't afford. Thousands of lenders were doing this, and what happened was that the market just kind of blew itself out, and it just created a pretty big mess. In Venezuela, the BBC described it being due to socialism, hyperinflation, and its president, Nicolas Maduro. What happened was the top 1% was just hoarding all the wealth up to the top. The government tried to compensate for the lower class. Well, what they were just doing was they were printing more money for the compensation, but that was just devaluing it even further, creating a downward spiral. It just doesn't work. And the Great Depression, Brian Deutman says it was caused by the stock market crash in 1929. The stock market was artificially being inflated. What happened was everybody was just investing into it, and it just went back to being more normal, and it just kind of shrunk. and collapsed itself and stole all the money that people put into it. The GDP was almost cut in half, and 1 out of 4 people who were employed were unemployed. This is a GDP growth graph of what happened during the Great Recession. Right about at 2008, you can see that it's already started to decline. 2009, it really went as low as it possibly could. It went back up, but you might not know what's going to happen the next time such a thing would happen. So what to expect? Robert Richardson showed some things that you would expect to happen. So credit is basically useless because it's not really real anyway. What's going to happen is that banks don't have any support on themselves. They don't have any substance, and so they're just going to shut down almost immediately. Stores don't have any money to buy food, so they're going to run out pretty quick, and the demand is just going to blow them out like in a week or so, especially in high populated areas. America, if it gets that bad, will shut down its utilities because it can't trade with other nations. That's going to hurt them, that's going to hurt us, and it's just going to be a downward spiral from then on. Starvation is going to start happening because there's no food in these stores. No water, no electricity, no hospitals. It's going to lead to disease. Martial law would probably be inflicted. It's just going to be too violent with all the panic. Then you have mass global panic. And it's just going to get a really big mess. So the bug-out bag, Michael Snyder has listed some objects that you would need in these situations. Food is always important. MREs. It's pretty dense. It'll fill you up pretty well. And it doesn't take up that much space. Water, of course. Especially if you have freeze-dried foods. You're going to need that. Weapons for self-defense. The mob is probably going to come over to your house asking for something, and you wouldn't ward them off. So a gun is usually most effective at that, but a knife has so many other uses that you would want that to shelter, because when you start running out of food, because you will, you're going to want to leave, and you're going to need this sort of shelter when you do that. Gasoline. Just because the stock market crashes doesn't mean that your car will. So you can always use gasoline to get out and go as far as you can, depending on how much you have. And a multi-tool just has so many uses, like a can opener, if you add canned foods, would be good. But in the biggest problem, one of the biggest problems that you'll notice is that with all the utilities shut down, hospitals are going to go out, and that's where you start getting epidemics.
All right, so another major problem that could happen in the apocalypse is an outbreak of an infection or disease that could spread. There could be epidemics or pandemics. The difference is epidemics are more centralized in a country, whereas pandemics can spread around the whole world. And so we've seen it before, Spanish flu, and even like measles and Ebola are still present today. All right, so the Spanish flu. This was the world's biggest outbreak when it came to diseases. 500 million people were infected, which right now it doesn't sound like a lot, but this was before the baby boom. This was World War I time. So there were about 5-6 million people in the world, and so that's a good 15-20% of the whole world was infected. 50 million died, and if you see on this chart here from the CDC, there were actually, it's 25 deaths at like mid to early 1918, 25 deaths per 1,000 people. And this was the highest it's ever been in recorded history before. All right, so we have measles. You know, you get the MMR shot when you're younger, so you're protected against it. So we think it's basically gone. We don't have to worry about it, but that's not the case. It's still very prevalent today in countries all around Europe, such as Romania, Netherlands, Germany. And so one of the cases actually was down in Anaheim in California, the Disneyland outbreak. What happened was there was this family who went there. They had 2 kids. Both of the kids actually had measles. And so what happened was they went there, and Disneyland is a very popular place. Around 44,000 to 45,000 people go there each day. And so at first, it didn't seem like anything happened, but within the week, half a dozen states all of a sudden had measles outbreak reports going here, there. They started popping up all over the place, even in Canada and Mexico too. And there was actually one case that happened in Canada, and it spread to this religious community, and they were like separate from the rest of Quebec, and so they didn't have health care or anything, and so they didn't have any vaccines, and it spread like wildfire through the entire community. And so it was cleared up relatively fast, but the problem was it still happens all the time, and there's no stopping it. Also, another problem happening, like I said, in Europe is something called an increasing lack of herd immunity. And so what herd immunity is, it's the idea of you have enough people who are immune to a disease, those who aren't able to get the vaccine because their immune system is weak, are able to be protected by it. Like seeing here, all these people are immune, and so it spreads, but it can't get to the people who aren't able to get the vaccines. And so for measles, it's really easily able to spread because it transmits through the air. So when you cough or sneeze, it's just everywhere. It goes everywhere. And so you need to have a 90 to 95% population that's vaccinated in order to have herd immunity. But the problem with many of the countries in Europe, they're falling far below that, and they've had an estimated around 37,000 cases in the past year. I saw from an article by Amy Maxman, and it just keeps spreading, and it's not dead, and it won't be dead for a while. Another one, Ebola. We've heard of this. We remember in 2014, the big outbreak. Well, in 1976, Ebola was first discovered, and from 1976 all the way until 2013, there were only reported 1,500 cases. So it was minimum, no one cared, it was under the radar. And then all of a sudden, 2014, you guys know about this, West Africa, there was an explosion of Ebola viruses going out. Almost 20,000 people in the span of 1 year got infected. And this was major, and the people who, the reporters who went to West Africa to report on this came back. A couple of them got Ebola, and it was here in the United States at one point. And so it's always a looming threat that we don't know about. And so the World Health Organization finally undeclared it a World Health Emergency in 2015, but it's starting to come back here. This is a graph we also got from the CDC, Center of Disease Control. And what's happened is where the World Health Organization has been monitoring, it's been clear there's been no Ebola, but the problem is, it says right here, 43% of people who died from Ebola in these cities were found dead in their communities. This suggests that the virus is spreading outside known chains of transmission. And so the World Health Organization isn't able to monitor all of one whole continent, and it's very impoverished, so it's very hard to track this down. As you can see, it's making a comeback this past November. Actually, it's reached its peak, and so it's still growing quite a bit. And so, what is the bug out bag going to do for you? Well, let me tell you. You need the first aid kit. It's the best thing you can have because Ebola, it transfers through body fluids, so that can be sweat, blood, urine, saliva, any of those things. And so you could have a minor cut on your arm, but that's not going to stop Ebola. It's going to get right in you. And when you get Ebola, you have a 50 to 90% chance of actually dying without proper treatment. And in an apocalyptic situation like this, the chance of you getting treatment is little to none. And also, an oxygen mask works very well because measles spreads through the air. Get on that oxygen mask, and you don't have to worry about all the pathogens coming into your body. You can stay safe, as well as water purification, because still water, viruses love still water, and they'll grow and spread and evolve through that. So you want to have those water purification tablets on you. And so the past 2 points we've talked about, economic crisis, that's something man-made. Epidemic, that's something man spread, but there are also looming threats that we, as a human species, just can't control.
Alright, I'm going to talk to you guys about some of these environmental disasters that we can't really control. Who's done like a volcano in like their 4th grade science fair? Did the baking soda, did anybody do that? Yeah. Actually, volcanoes are a lot worse. I'm going to tell you about some past volcanic events that are kind of well known to give you an example of how these things can kind of go. I'm sure everyone's heard of Mount St. Helens. This was the largest recorded volcanic eruption in the US. Happened in 1980. 57 people died as a result of this, and it caused about $3.3 billion worth of damages. And another larger one, which is probably a little more unknown, is Tambora. This was a volcano in Indonesia that erupted in 1816. This caused the death of around 10,000 people, and it actually triggered something known as the Year Without Summer. because when a volcano on this scale erupts, it will send an ash cloud into the atmosphere that will actually block out the sun and lower global temperatures. Now this kind of causes a cascading effect of obviously lower temperatures and food shortages because you can't grow crops without a lot of sunlight. An upcoming one, I'm sure people have heard of Yellowstone. It's a big national park here in the U.S. Does anyone know that Yellowstone is actually a huge volcano?
It's a super volcano.
Heard of that? Yes, super volcano. What?
Have you seen the movie 2020?
Yeah. Yeah, but this is a real thing. This is a huge threat. The Earth acts in cycles, so geologists are actually able to predict volcanic eruptions. And according to some sources, Yellowstone is like 40,000 years overdue. Some people say that, some people say it's not. So really, no one's sure when or if it's going to blow up, but it's definitely a possibility. If Yellowstone were to erupt, it would be on a scale like 6,000 times bigger than the Mount St. Helens eruption. So this would be a global disaster. Again, the ash cloud is the most dangerous thing from this. It spreads ash across the entire U.S., around the globe, blocks out the sun, temperatures drop everywhere globally, and it again leads to food shortage on a massive scale. So what does our bag do to protect you from this? A couple of things, obviously, with the global temperature change, even somewhere here like in Arizona where it's very hot, even if it was the summer, with this ash cloud going around the U.S., if you're not killed by it already, you somehow managed to survive that initial eruption, good job, first of all. And then it's going to be very cold. It's going to get super cold at night, so you're going to want the warm clothes that you have in your bag. And also the bandana will be helpful, because if you need to go out and there's ash in the air, you need something to obviously like cover your face, and doing this isn't very practical, so you're going to want to have something you can tie around your face like a mask or a bandana or kind of a respirator sort of thing. And again, food shortage. You're not going to be able to go to the grocery store and just buy your food, so then our MREs again are a very key element of this bag. Okay, the next one I'm going to talk to you guys about is earthquakes. These are not as large scale, obviously, as volcanoes, but if you're trapped somewhere within the zone of the destruction of an earthquake, it's obviously a very apocalyptic event for you. You're going to have things like infrastructure and utilities gone away. Has anyone heard of the 1994 Northridge earthquake in California? This was a huge one. Again, somewhere around the realm of $22 billion worth of damages, around 9,000 people injured, 57 dead from this one. They had loss of power, utilities, things like freeways collapsed, there's no transportation, no immediate emergency services, and things like that. So again, very bad. But what can the bag do for you? Again, food and water is our key point to this. This is one of the biggest things that you're going to want to make sure you have ready in the event of one of these things. Ready.gov is a government organization that tells people how to prepare for events like this. They recommend you have 3 days of food and water in the event of an earthquake, because that's about how long it can take for emergency services to reach you. First aid, again, with somewhere around like 9,000 people being injured and obviously not having access to a hospital because there's no power and no roads to travel to them, you're going to want to be able to patch yourself up with first aid kit, lots of physical injuries, people being trapped underneath rubble, patching yourself up, helping your friends without access to emergency service. And for the earthquake, also the bandana is important. This one's kind of specific, but earlier we said a brightly colored bandana. This is helpful for signaling if you're like trapped underneath the rubble or something. Emergency services are often going to be looking for bright colored scraps of clothing, things to be able to identify you. If you're trapped under something like that, it's all gray. So a colorful bandana is helpful to stand out and be rescued. Okay, EMP, this is probably one of the least commonly known and kind of speculated about. It stands for an electromagnetic pulse. This is a large electronic wave that can scan the planet and kind of wipe out all electronic devices, so everything is gone. These are triggered from a couple of things, either a solar flare, which is again a natural event that can happen when the sun will emit a large wave of radiation and kind of take out electronic devices on the planet. Do you have a question to add?
How is a nuclear detonation an environmental?
It's just another thing that could trigger.
Okay.
So this one's kind of both. Thank you for asking. It's theorized that a high altitude nuclear detonation can send the kind of radiation around to trigger an electronic pulse to wipe out electronics kind of globally. But the big thing and the biggest theorized cause of this would be a solar flare directly from the sun. And again, your electronics are wiped out. This is no phone, no internet, no cars. Cars rely on electronics for starting and stuff. So everything technological is gone. We're kind of back to the Stone Age, so to say. So again, what can you do? The bug out bag. Flashlights, electronic, obviously not going to work. So if it's dark and you need to look for food or rescue your family or something, non-electronic sources of light like you have in the bag are flares and glow sticks. Those will work in the event of electronic electromagnetic pulse. And another thing, a survival guide. Obviously, you're not going to be able to look up information on your phone because the internet's not going to be there and your phone's not going to turn on. So having a concrete source of knowledge to be able to look up something like how to rig a trap to catch a rabbit or something to eat is very helpful in the event of an electromagnetic pulse. So yeah, those are kind of our three big scenarios for catastrophe or apocalypse and how you can kind of survive them.
In conclusion, bug out bags, they're just generally a good value. Some of these bug out bags can go for as low as $33. Now, some of the more high-end ones can go up a little pricier, up to like about $160. But again, overall, for everything that is in these, this is a good price for it's basically a safety net, and safety is kind of what's important. Better safe than sorry is the motto, and it's a good motto to live by. If you haven't, you probably noticed that we didn't talk about silly things. This isn't the zombie apocalypse. This isn't aliens falling from the sky or demons rising from the ground or anything like that. These are things that are pretty much mostly either predicted to happen or could soon happen. People who are called crazy or over-prepared are often the ones who survive these sorts of things. It reminds me, stuff like this kind of reminds me of this one person who had put balloons and sandbags and stuff around his house in order to ward off like a flood. People call him crazy, and a flood happened. Surprise, the crazy person had his house survive, and even his lawn survived the flood. That's nuts. And this is not nearly as expensive, it's not nearly as insane, it's not nearly as specific. This can apply in a lot of situations. So whether it's an economic crisis where money has fallen on its face, whether it's an epidemic where people have fallen on their faces, whether it's the environment and Mother Nature is falling on her face, it doesn't matter. The bug out bag will be able to help. And it's here to help to help you plan when you can't plan to stop any of this stuff. So, and you know what? Even if you're not planning for the apocalypse, even if all of this sounded crazy, you think none of this is gonna happen, the bug out bag is still useful. You could still, when you're camping, think about it. You're not gonna be able to use money to buy food in the middle of the forest. You're not gonna be able to get to a hospital fast enough if you scrape your arm on a rock and you get infected. You're not gonna be able to go immediately somewhere safe when earthquakes or volcanoes happen in the middle of the forest. So, and the bug out bag will help you in those cases. You still have food. You still have things to help you get food. You still have the temporary shelter, whether it's long-term or short-term, to help you just survive for a little bit. And you have medical, which is good in any situation, really. So, in short, it's helpful no matter what. We genuinely hope you consider buying the bug out bag. Thank you for listening, and please stay safe, whether or not that means buying the bug out bag, but we sincerely hope you consider it.